Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, Verse 37. Iti langhita maryadam dakshaka saptame hani dakshati sma kulagaram shodito me tatadruham Maryadam, etiquette. Takshaka, snake bird. Saptame, on the seventh, ahani, day. Dankshati, will bite. Sma, certainly. Kula angaram, the wretched of the dynasty. Chodita, having done. Me. My Tata Druham, enmity towards the father. Translation: the Brahmana's son cursed the king thus: on the seventh day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched one of the dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, because of his having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father. Purport: thus the beginning of the misuse of Brahminical power began, and gradually the Brahmanas in the age of Kali became devoid of both Brahminical powers and culture. The Brahmana boy considered Maharaj Parikshit to be a Kulangara, or the wretched of the dynasty. But factually the Brahmana boy himself was so because only from him did the Brahmana caste become powerless, like the snake whose poisoned teeth are broken. The snake is fearful as long as his poisonous teeth are there. Otherwise, he is fearful only to children. The personality of Kali conquered the Brahmana boy first, and gradually the other castes. Thus, the whole scientific system of the orders of society in this age has assumed the form of a vitiated caste system, which is now being uprooted by another class of men, similarly influenced by the age of Kali. One should see to the root cause of vitiation and not try to condemn the system as it is, without knowledge of its scientific value. Translation: the Brahmana's son cursed the king thus: on the seventh day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched one of the dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, because of his having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father. Here we have the curse. The previous verses described the emotional state of the son, which brought about this curse which we see here. And the curse, as expected, is directed towards Parikshit Maharaj. And he gives the reason. And the reason is Langita Maryadam. So Maryadam literally means a limit. So it often refers to a rule. And if you break the rule, that's not proper. So Prabhupada is translating it as surpassing etiquette, or we can say he broke the rule. Or Maryada also means respect. There's a respect given. If you don't give the respect, it's considered breaking the rule. So he didn't give proper respect. And then he amplifies that by in the last line by saying Tata Druham. He committed violence against my father. He put the snake around his neck, the dead snake. So he was very rude, and he committed this act. Not only he was, let's say, rude, but he carried that out into an act of violence against his father. So therefore I will curse him to get bitten by a snake bird. That's his thing. In 7 days this will happen, and then Parikshit will die. So in other words, he is cursing the king to die for this offense. So previously we've spoken about all the intricacies of who's right and who's wrong, whatever like that. Ultimately we see it's an arrangement of the Supreme Lord so that Bhagavatam could be spoken. At the same time, symbolically, we can see here that it indicates how not just other people, but even the Brahmana caste got influenced by the age of Kali. And therefore, this boy committed this act of cursing the devotee. So it's, we could say, excessive punishment for the breaking of the etiquette. Yet the Brahmin boy was very angry and upset, and therefore he did this. So in the purport, of course, Prabhupada explains how the caste system degraded. The caste system, of course, has maybe a negative connotation to it in the modern world, because we think of classes of people, privileged people and unprivileged people. And usually when you think of caste, we also think of birth. So everyone gets their good or bad fortune by birth. If you're born in an upper caste, you get advantages by birth. And if you're born in a lower caste, you have disadvantage by birth. So you don't have the same privileges, in other words, in society, depending on what family you're born in. And therefore, in the modern world, this is considered to be rather archaic or old-fashioned, that we can't judge people by their birth, and we have to see the quality of the person. And of course, we see that the Vaishnavas take this attitude. This is the perception of the Vaishnava, that it should not be based solely upon birth, the designation of Varna. We cannot condemn a person and limit him by his birth in a certain family. If he has qualities and abilities which are of a higher Varna or caste, then he should be allowed to follow that particular profession. So one aspect of the Varna, of course, is the profession. So certain professions are designated as Sudra professions, basically labor things, things involving a lot of physical work. These are called Sudra occupations. And the Vaishya occupations are protecting the cows, or dairy, and agriculture, farming, and commerce, mercantile things, which takes up a lot of the population. Of course, it is said that the Sudras have the highest percentage, maybe 70% or 80%. The Vaishyas maybe 25%. Then we have the Kshatriyas, the managers, less number of people. And then at the top we get the Brahmanas, who are the studiers of the Vedas and preservers of the traditions, and they give advice to the Kshatriya on how to rule the country. So as has come down over the last few thousand years, it's all by birth. It's all determined. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada, of course, the same. They are pointing out that birth is one consideration, but it's not the only consideration. So therefore, we have to consider other factors like qualities that develop in the person, how they act in their life. This, of course, is partly determined by how they're raised as children, and their environment, and their education. And due to that, then when they're grown up, they may show different character from their particular varna they're born into, the family, and therefore they should take up a different occupation. So that is the basic idea of the Vaishnava concerning the varna. It's more flexible. And in Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has a whole discussion about this varna situation and the real meaning of varna. Ultimately, of course, even Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it's external. It's got to do with the material world and our material bodies, etc. And the real the Dharma is prema. Bhakti and prema, that's the real nature of the jiva. and everything else is superimposed by material energy on us, and then we divide up into different qualities according to gunas. And if we're predominantly tamagun by our activities in previous lifetimes and our karma, then we end up as a Sudra and or a Vaishya or Kshatriya Brahmana according to our acts in this world. But it's material, and the nature of the soul is completely different from that. Therefore, the Lord Chaitanya often in his conversations rejects the whole system. For instance, the Madhvas, Lord Chaitanya was traveling in South India. He came to Udupi, which is the center of the Madhva Sampradaya, Vaishnava Sampradaya. And they'd been there for 1,000 years or so, and a very strong philosophical system, Dvaita philosophy, etc. And the sannyasis there carry on the tradition of study and worship of Krishna. So they had a conversation, and according to Chaitanya Charitamrita, they had a discussion, and then Lord Chaitanya said, what is the real essence of life? And then they said, Varnashram system. And he said, no. So he rejected it there. And in conversation with Ramananda Roy also, this came up, Varnashram, and said, no, tell me something else, tell me something else, tell me something else. So we see there's somewhat of a rejection of that whole system by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But if we look closely at his life, he didn't reject the system, really, because he was part of the system. He took sannyas, which is ashrama within the Varnashram system, as a Brahmana. He was born in a Brahmin family. He took sannyas. That's part of the Varnashram system also. And when he was a sannyasi, he didn't disregard those rules. He followed the rules very strictly. Very strictly. So, therefore, he also operated within that system. And he never encouraged his followers also to go beyond that Varnashram system. So we see all of his devotees in Navadvip. They were all also, of course, the Muslims were there with no Varnashram system, but the Hindu society, so-called Hindu society, was there, and they were still operating with the different Varnas. So there were many Brahmanas there, including Lord Chaitanya's family, all Brahmanical. Even Rupa Goswami's, their ancestors were also Brahmins. But then they broke the system, they broke the rules, Rupa and Sanatan, and they got employed by the Muslim government. That was considered forbidden. You can't do that. You associate with the Muslims, you're finished. You're not part of our system anymore. So they weren't considered Hindus anymore. They weren't considered part of the system because of that. So the others operated within that system. They followed the rules of their particular caste. Many were Brahmins, some were Vaishyas, some were Kshatriyas, etc. Raghunath Das came from a landowner family, so they weren't Brahmins. Others came from low caste. There's several devotees, famous devotees, who came from very low caste, whatever, Sudra caste or whatever. And of course, Haridas Thakur came from outside the caste. He was Muslim born, but he got accepted also. So that was a little bit exceptional. So generally, Lord Chaitanya followed the system, but then he's also willing to modify or go beyond the system in the case of Haridas Thakur and others like this. So, for himself, of course, he followed the system. So he didn't completely reject it, nor did he encourage his followers to reject it. But at the same time, the emphasis was upon devotional service and whatever was favorable for bhakti that they followed. As time went on, we get up into after Lord Chaitanya, that was 500 years ago, society began to change more and more. The Muslims were there in Lord Chaitanya's time, disturbing a little bit. And then the British came, it's more disturbance to the system. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself, he praises, in one of his books, he praises, not some praise, but he just gives a little credit to the British that they didn't destroy things so much. they at least preserved something. So he gave him credit for that. At the same time as the British came, the Muslims came, the British came, and then because of all these influences and the time itself, the whole system began to deteriorate as well, more and more. and it wasn't so strong. So it was not the same system in Bhaktivinoda's time as it was in Lord Chaitanya's time. And of course, Lord Chaitanya's time, it was not the same system it was 500 years before, when Madhvacharya was around. Society kept changing, and that Varna ashram system got a little weaker and weaker as time went on, and all these different influences and foreign invasion and the British there ruling. So the system became more and more, let's say, weak because of that. And of course, the British were not too fond of that caste system. They considered it to be, too rigid and whatever. In spite of the fact we see even in Britain, they do have a class system also, and they have the upper class and lower class and everything but it's not so strictly defined as we have in India. They do have a system, and I think most countries in the world do have a system like that. It's not so evident, but it's there, and we have a kingly class, a priestly class, and whatever. So anyway, with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it had it weakened quite a lot. But he also said, as Prabhupada says here, you shouldn't try to condemn the system as it is without knowledge of its scientific value. So this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says. This is a very scientific system if we understand what it is and if it is applied properly. Then it is a very good social system for human society, if it's done properly. That's what he says. He says, of course, in the modern world it's not done properly, and therefore people are finding all sorts of faults with it. But if we understand how it should be operated properly, then it is a very proper system. The value of this system is it's a social system, which means it's taking care of your material needs, but it has a spiritual goal. So that's its advantage over other social systems. Every society has, some rules and everything like that. Generally, it's got nothing to do with ultimate goal of life. It's financial, economic, everything like that, social system, and keep the peace. Basically, that's what the social system is for. And then you're free to do whatever you want within that system. So it's not inbuilt into the system a spiritual goal. But the Varnashram system has an inbuilt spiritual goal. So that's what gives it an advantage over the regular system. However, why it is considered secondary as far as devotional service is concerned is because though it does have a spiritual goal, ultimately, that spiritual goal is not the stress in the society. It's not the ultimate stress thing in society. It's a goal, final goal, but it's more or less indirect for most people in the society. And therefore, they will emphasize artha, dharma, kama. These are the things that are the goals of most people. And most people actually is artha and kama. Artha means subsist. Everybody wants to get enough food, everybody wants to protect their family, everybody wants to get a house. So that's basically what people are interested in, and we'll see that around the world. The government is catered for that purpose, to see that everybody at least gets some food and some shelter, education, whatever like this. That's what's on people's minds, and the Varnashram system also caters to that. And it supplies that. So a lot of the system is for that, giving them sustenance. Now what they do in that system is then they start dividing up the occupations, because you need an occupation to sustain yourself, so therefore they start giving people occupations so they can work. You can't be lazy. Well, now we have a social system and you don't have to work and you can get money and survive. But that system, no. You have to work. You work for your living, and then you get a certain type of job according to your qualities. So that way, you work, you get a result, and you can live. So basically, that's what the varnas are for, and it supplies artha, and it gives a little bit beyond that, not just survival, but a little bit extra. So you get a little bit of extra enjoyment. That's the kama. So therefore we have things like arts and architecture and so many other things, recreational things, sports and all these. That's all kama area. It's not necessary just to survive. But it's there, and usually human beings need a little bit of this for their, to be stable or whatever. So this is the kama aspect. The system provides for that also. And then most of the people, that's just the Sudra population, Vaishya population, they're kind of content with that. They get their food, they get their recreation or football or whatever, or cricket or all that, and they get to laugh a little bit, and they get some amusements and whatever, and they're happy. And so therefore, even in the Varnashram system, it's a little bit indirect, but from the top down, we have the system where the Brahmanas advise the Kshatriyas and the Kshatriyas implement the rules. So therefore, the Brahmanas are supposed to know the Vedas. So they are the spiritual input for all the rules in society. So therefore, the laws and the discipline has to be in terms of that, the final goal that's coming from the Brahmanas. But that's just a little bit indirect. But nevertheless, the goal is spiritual. So that's what distinguishes it from the normal social systems we have in this world. As Prabhupada says here, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says, it's a scientific system. It's laid out very nicely. Ultimately, of course, you see it's all scriptural, so it's coming from the Supreme Lord himself. It must be accurate, and it must be practical also. And it has a system that'll work, and it'll gradually purify everybody and get them into spiritual life eventually. That's its purpose. Now, if we directly go to spiritual life, then we don't need this function anymore as long as we can get some food. Then we can just do our spiritual life. But if we're not involved in spiritual life, then this is an indirect system. The problem is that it doesn't operate over one lifetime. It's not that in one lifetime you start at the bottom and then finally become spiritual at the end of your life. It's an idea that goes on life after life after life. So after starting at the bottom over many, many births, maybe 20 births, you get to be a Brahman maybe. And then when you're a Brahmana, then you start practicing spiritual life. Basically, that's how it operates. So it's a system that has to be intact over long periods of time before we'll see the results of it. We can say that's its drawback in one sense. It's a matter of slow progress. On the other hand, and we can say it's also practical because we see that people don't change quickly. It takes them many, many lifetimes to advance a little bit in their consciousness and go upward a little bit from the bottom of Tamagun to the middle of Tamagun. It's a big struggle there to get them up. And to get from Tamagun to Rajagun may take many, many lifetimes, a person. People are stuck with their habits. And they're very attached. So the next lifetime they're still attached to those same habits. So to get them a little less attached to their enjoyment is very, very difficult. But it can take place, but it's very, very gradual. So that's why it takes many, many lifetimes to change habits, to change attachments to the material world. So very slow progress, but it's realistic in one sense that it would take that long. Therefore, it does take, for the system to have its effect, it takes a long period of time. Then one problem is that it requires a very strong Kshatriya and Brahminical community. Here we see the Brahman got affected, the Brahmins are getting affected, and it was contaminated. And then we see the Kshatriyas become contaminated in the 9th canto. There's and then in the 12th canto also, it shows how the whole Kshatriya race got contaminated also. So if these two go off, then the whole system falls apart. Or even if the Brahminical community goes off, then they cannot advise the Kshatriya properly. And the Kshatriya will make all sorts of wrong decisions and become very selfish, and then everybody will get discontent and they'll overthrow the Kshatriya. So it depends on the whole system being intact, then it works nicely. And if one of the parts is off, particularly the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, then it falls apart. So here, the analysis is that it started at the top with the Brahmana getting affected, and they became weaker and that, so they cannot advise the Kshatriyas properly. This is the system, and in Kali Yuga, it began to fall apart. And then when it falls apart, we can say impurities creep into the system. And therefore people will start criticizing it or whatever. And it becomes a weaker and weaker system. And that's, of course, is what happened, and has happened in Kali Yuga. After the last of the descendants there of Manu disappeared, I think Parikshit had his grandson. After his grandson, then everything declined radically. So there was no descendant of Manu left to continue the dynasty of kings. So therefore, the Kshatriyas became completely absent. So it was very difficult to have a whole Varnashram system for a country or a world when that king is not there. And the Brahmana community got affected also. So in Kali Yuga, therefore, we can expect a perfect Varnashram system. So what to do? It's a scientific system, it's the best system, social system, but at the same time it looks like it's impossible to implement. But then we have Prabhupada, and he says, well, we should establish the Varnashram system. So then, how to do that? This is a big problem, a big controversy. How do we establish that system? What is the method of doing that? Is it for society? Do we want to change the whole society and put a king in charge? Under a Brahman rulership or whatever, Brahman community, neither of which is intact. We don't have a royal line, and we don't have a Brahminical community who can strongly influence the king. Not there. How do we establish that? Or should we establish it within our society, ISKCON? So then that is a little easier, we can say, because it's limited. We don't have to deal with the whole society, which has a different government system. But then again, how to implement it properly again? And do we implement Varnas? And do we have Brahmins at the top and then Kshatriyas next under them, taking advice from the Brahmanas? So these are, questions we have to ask very carefully. Or does it mean don't concentrate on the Varnas at all? Just let everybody follow their natural propensity, whatever they can do in life, and have their job that way. And at the same time, at least support everybody, see that everybody gets their subsistence and whatever, and is able to get their artha and kama, and then practice bhakti or whatever. So it's very little difficult how we could implement this. In its simplest form, maybe, we can say that, or as a minimal idea, is that we take elements of the rules and regulations which are favorable for individual advancement, and we can incorporate those rules of Varnashram. So it's not a complete system of trying to implement castes and ashramas completely. Rather, just take the rules of cleanliness, rules of social interaction, rules of respect. Take those from the Varnashram system and try to apply those as much as we can within our life. Much easier to do that than try to start making a whole social system with different classes and all this like that. Yeah. So, in one sense, that's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur recommends also. He says that we can take the rules of Varnashram as gona vidi, or secondary rules of bhakti, as far as we're living in society and we have a material body. So we can follow the rules to support our material body and keep it healthy, and operate within a society and interact with people according to the rules of Varnashram. And that much we could do, which is not so difficult. And so that was one advice that he gives. So anyway, it is a question, a controversial question, and next week we're going to deal with that in the GBC. What is Varnashram? What does it mean? Inside, outside, Varnas, ashramas, something else, whatever. Because Prabhupada mentions it so much, but yet everybody's still struggling to figure out what it is. So for some it means farm communities, for some it means institute Varnas and whatever like this. So it's a complicated question. So it's still, as far as ISKCON is concerned, it's still at the theoretical stage of trying to define what is practical for us. Okay, any question?
Thank you for the class, Maharaj. I have two questions. one of them is the word in the translation Maryagam, or respect and the culture of etiquette. We find that in the modern age, what to speak of in the Indian body, people, everyone wants to be on top, wants to be told, and the culture somehow is being lost in terms of being respectful to elders and things like that. And also Prabhupada said we have to, I think he said we have to sacrifice gallons of blood and sweat just to make one devotee. So those rules of etiquette are not so much followed. But then how to imbibe that, because through the rules of etiquette we get the blessings of the Vaishnavas.
Well, we have two sets of rules. One is the Varnashramic rules of etiquette, and then we have the Vaishnava rules of etiquette. They more or less kind of correspond, but at the same time, we say the Vaishnavas emphasize the degree of how much a person is a devotee, and the respect is based on that. Still, we also observe the other one from the Varna ashram system. So in the Varna, as far as society is concerned, as far as an interaction of people, then there are degrees of respect. So the king is respected, the authority is respected, that's one thing. Age is respected, it doesn't matter who he is. If they're older, they have to be given some respect and taken care of, and whatever like that. And of course, if it's parents or grandparents, again, have to be taken care of. So age itself is another one. Another, of course, is caste, by caste, so therefore the Brahmin gets all the worship, most worship. And then the others are respected accordingly to that. And we see that this took place also in the Bhagavatam. You'll see different places, even in Krishna's pastimes. They respect everybody, they respect him in different ways. So they honor the Sudras in one way, they honor the Vaishyas in another way, they honor the Kshatriyas in another way, they honor the Brahmanas in a different way. And then within the social group in Vrindavan, the Nanda Maharaja will respect all the people there, but they respect them differently according to their level, like that. So caste is another thing, or Varna is another thing. Ashram is again there. So then in the ashram system, the renounced people get a lot of respect. So the brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, sannyasis have to get respected by the grihasthas. The brahmacharis are students and they don't have subsistence, so that they have to be supported by the grihasthas. And then the vanaprasthas and sannyasis again are without subsistence, so they have to get supported by the grihasthas. So that's another ashram respect that has to be there. So that's all within the Varna ashram system. Age. Even money, people that are wealthy have to be respected. That's another one. Simply if he's wealthy, then you have to give him some respect for that. And of course we respect people for qualities, because they're a little more subtle, because that could go for anybody within Varna and ashram. If they have good qualities, we respect them even if they're from a lower Varna or lower ashram or whatever. Doesn't matter, we have to give respect in that sense. So that is there within the Varnashram system. And it's also convenient for devotees also to follow the same rules as much as possible. And we see that the devotees in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes also follow those rules. Then we have within the devotee community, then we have another layer that is respect for the Vaishnav. So we respect all Vaishnavas. We respect all living entities. And then among all living entities, we respect the cows more than the other animals. Then among human beings, we respect the Brahmana more than that. But then above that, we respect the Vaishnava. He gets the topmost respect. But then among Vaishnavas, then we have different levels. So we have the Vaishnava Praya, who's somewhat of a Vaishnava, maybe he chants Hare Krishna once in a while. And then, but we don't know what rules he's following, and he's doing many other activities or whatever like that. He's called almost a Vaishnava. He's not hostile to Vaishnavas, but he's not really serious either. So we give him mental respect to that person. He's doing something at least. Then the serious practitioners, those who have vows, who are following the standards, Vaishnavic standards, rules and regulations, who may take initiation, etc. So they're given very great respect, physical respect itself, and offer respects, etc. Then we have those who are Vaishnavas, serious Vaishnavas, who are on a higher spiritual level, quite absorbed in Krishna, so they get more respect, and one serves them. So therefore we have respect among Vaishnavas, but among the Vaishnavas we treat them also in different ways according to their level of advancement. And then as well as that, then we have the Vaishnavas who are older, the Vaishnavas who are younger, and Vaishnavas who are in a position like that, so then we give respect there also. So there's two types of respect. One is according to advancement, the other is according to the varnashramic rules for respect, etc. like that. So as much as possible, both should be followed, but we give prominence to the Vaishnavic respect, and therefore and Lord Chaitanya says, he could be a Sudra, he could be a Brahmana, he could be a Chandala, it doesn't matter, but if he knows Krishna, then he's Guru. So he goes beyond the Varnashram system and says whoever's got the spiritual knowledge, he gets the most respect like that. So that's how we have to operate within as devotees. In any case, respect has to be given to all living entities. And we don't, one of the rules of bhakti, I think the 20th Anga of bhakti is, don't disturb other living entities. That's the rule of bhakti. So we try not to disturb any living entity, especially human beings, and especially Vaishnavas.
Then on that point of respect, how would that externally look like? Because in consciousness, the respect is there, but also it has to manifest externally. So how would that look like in menial service, giving gifts and reciprocating? Because my Krishna Swami was doing an interesting class the other day, and he was doing Bhagavad Gita study, and earlier my people just a point about if one is a Brahmana and there is no remuneration, that's sacrificed in the mode of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
So if my Guru Maharaj was saying that he doesn't mind because he's a guru, so he gets the respect and he gets the donations, but in future or anything, they don't really get that reciprocation. People, there's no training within ISKCON to reciprocate. Even in ordinary dealings, people, there's reciprocation. If someone does something for you, you do something according to your capacity. So how is that training going to come? How does respect look externally across the whole?
Well, I suppose it requires more knowledge and more training. We see in Nectar of Instruction there, the dealings of the Vaishnava is to receive and to accept gifts, to feed and to get fed. So you feed other people, you give them some prasadam, or they give you prasadam, you give something to them, they give something to you, you give some knowledge to them, they give knowledge to you. So that's an exchange. So that's how an affection is created between Vaishnavas. So it's a kind of a basic rule for exchange. If we want to establish relationships, it can't be one way. It has to go both ways. So it has to be, we can say, inculcated, whatever.
In relation to what you said about Varnashram system, it's not very clear what Prabhupada wanted. If he wanted the Varnashram system to be applied in society or within our community.
Yeah, it's a little bit vague, we don't know.
Everything I read from his letters for our communities and everything, it looks like what he wants is the ISKCON communities to be an example for the outside world. He didn't write much about.
Yeah.
So that's my understanding. It looks very clear that he wanted.
Yeah. Well, it's much easier to work in a smaller group than try to influence society at large. It's very difficult to deal with the whole society. We can do something ourselves, and then you can influence by example.
And by your own modeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see from my experience that somehow this system is applied within us. Because, for example, people who are managers in the temple, they are receiving advice from the GBC, which is the Brahminical body, etc.
Yeah.
So I don't see like this big controversy, or maybe I'm just...
Yeah, no, the controversy was that we want to make more strict definitions of who's the Brahmana, who's the Kshatriya, who's the Vaishya. You can be a Vaishya, but you cannot be a Kshatriya. You can be a Kshatriya, but you can't be a Brahmana. Then people say, I don't like that. Yeah, I want to do this, like this. So if we start, putting people into groups and limiting what they can do, that would be a little problem.
Yeah, and also like you said, we are Vaishnavas. So we are beyond, in a way.
Yeah, flexible. Yeah, we can do anything for Krishna.
Because the main concept is to be servant.
Yeah. Yeah.
System,
Yeah.
we just
Yeah.
be a
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
here is like just service,
Yeah.
which is equal to me in the Vaishnavism.
Yeah. So obviously, within a Vaishnava community, we cannot use the same system as the external system because they weren't devotees at all, really. A little bit of devotee, but not much. And here it's all devotees, so we have to modify that system.
And also, if you start having Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and normal ones in this community, it will pollute everything. Because Kshatriyas will use to eat meat, and Vaishyas will be just consuming
Drinking.
So I think it's a diffusion between the system and Vaishnava.
Yeah. So we can take, valuable information from the Varnashram system and apply it according to our situation as devotees as much as possible. Flexible. That's probably the end result, which we'll have to do.
And then in regard to the respect that Vaishnava was mentioning, I read in the Bhagavad Gita often, or in Bhagavatam, that actually a person who is really advanced makes no distinction
Oh, yeah.
between
Yeah.
all those things are material concepts.
Yeah.
But if you're really advanced, you respect everyone.
Yeah.
So it's not like we have to all the time. And even I think it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur who said that offensive is to not treat properly any living entity.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
respect has to be given to everyone.
Yeah. And of course, it's an offense to see a Vaishnava in terms of Varna. he's a Sudra Vaishnava or he's a Brahmin Vaishnava. That's considered to be offensive. He's a Vaishnava, that's it.
I was just going to say that's one of the challenges of the Varnashram. How to apply it. I just remember a story that years ago in Melbourne. There was a devotee from India who came and he was born in a Brahmin family. So, I asked him what he paid at the time. So I said, could you help out washing the pots? And he said, we are born in a Brahmin family. We are not washing the pots. So it's had a lot of challenges.
So if that happens in the Vaishnava community also, it'll be a little strange, isn't it? I'm a Brahmana, so I can't do that service because I'm a Brahmana. Yeah. So we have to work on very, very careful definitions and duties, etc., and not get overcome by the caste itself and its restrictions, whatever like that.
Because even Lord Chaitanya was cleaning the temples.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, from the regular caste system in India as it goes on now, people consider, that's how can you do that? That's a low class job, But from the Vaishnava point of view, cleaning the temple is a wonderful job, so no problem. Okay, Hare Krishna.